Hey YouTube, this is a response to B. Scott's video about Pastor Wright's comments about African American children only being left brain or right brained. I guess this is my perspective on that. I understand where he's coming from. I didn't say I agreed with where he was coming from, but I do understand. Because when you get into the upper echelon of education, basically your sources are the sightings of magazines, articles, periodicals from someone's thesis or research. So when you take that under consideration, you have very, very, very many perspectives on how people learn, or how children learn, or even how adults learn. So maybe in some particular clinical study that someone did for their thesis, this is found to be true. In another study, it may not be true. So it's kind of like you got a library of opinions, and most people tend to gravitate toward one or the other. So the fact that he is saying that doesn't bother me in one aspect, because an opinion is an opinion, a perspective is a perspective. It bothers me, on the other hand, to think that there is someone out there that is going to say that's absolutely true, and then start to begin to treat African American children as if it is true. I think one of the comments that I had even read was from one of the people who had viewed the video, was talking about, left brain, right brain, left hand, right hand. And that point was very valid. Most people say that if you are right brained, you tend to be left handed. So are you saying that all African American children are left handed? Don't think so. I'm a righty. So I wouldn't take it too seriously. I wouldn't get my feathers ruffled about it by any means. It's just a perspective. Yes, unfortunately or fortunately, he is saying this to a congregation of 8,000, which potentially now, because of who he is and who he's associated with, has gone out to all of the world. However, it's just a perspective. Anyone that really wants to know or anything about that will research it, and they will have to make the decision themselves. But I don't by any means think that portrays Obama's views. And even if it did, I don't think that it would matter to me that much. Because again, like I said, it's just a different perspective. My own perspective is more toward something called multiple intelligences. And what that basically says, and this is in regard to adults, but it can be applied to children as well. Actually, it is applied to adults and children. And what this says is that, everyone is kind of geared toward some specific way of learning. It just doesn't, limit them to left brain, right brain. Multiple intelligences actually has 7. I think he's working on 8th. Author's name is Daniel Goleman, I believe. Goleman. And he basically is saying, and this is Tracy really, really shortening the whole book. He really says that people have a tendency towards things as they learn. There are certain people that have a tendency that is more musical. Certain people have a tendency of learning that is more artsy, or more mathematic, or more what is another one? Mathematic, or natural, or associated with plants and organic things, spiritual. So I kind of sway towards that school of thought, and that teachers today probably need to take a look at that. I did know of one example of a teacher who actually set that up in her classroom. So the children who had more of a tendency to learn with music and rhythm, they gravitated toward a table that where they could learn with tangible instruments and rhythm and beats and things like that. Children who had a tendency toward organic things or natural things, she had a space for them where they could plant flowers or have an ant farm or something. Children that had a tendency toward math then had puzzles or equations or a lot of periodicals or things like that. It's not saying that the children that are musical don't read. It's not saying that the children that are organic aren't musically inclined. These are just tendencies. These are not the end all be all of how they learn or respond in kind to everything. My tendency is musical first, then organic, then mathematic. See how that works? So for me, it's just another perspective. Sometimes people say what they have the limited knowledge of. That's just the way people are until he reads something else, or if he's somehow engrossed in a conversation with someone who is in the upper echelons of education, maybe children's education or adult education, and he learns something differently, his opinion is going to change. So, it's just where people are and the knowledge that they have at that time, they kind of tend to spout off, which we all do. So don't get your feathers ruffled over it. Don't take it too seriously.